Welcome everyone to this lunch seminar at ITRL. It's great to see you everybody, new faces and also people I've seen before. Very welcome. A very special welcome to our online audience, which I know is out there, but we hope to hear from you if you have questions, etc. This seminar is the 9th of 10 seminars in a series, and we have been ongoing for this during the whole spring, but now we are ending up in the summer. And today I'm very happy to introduce Maria Huge-Brodin, our guest speaker today from University of Linköping.
Thank you.
You are going to talk about green logistics. And just a few words before we start, I would like to say just a few words about ITRL, which is a very strange abbreviation, but it stands for Integrated Transport Research Lab. And we are a research center focusing on, our aim is to create and enable sustainable transport in 3 different areas, which we can see over here. It's about mobility services, efficient transports, and automated and connected transports. So once again, Maria, most welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for attending this seminar. I don't know how you do usually with questions, if you allow questions while I speak. I do that. It depends on what you want.
Yes.
I can take questions, so just raise your hand and show me you want to say something. I'm going to talk to you about my topic. It's my topic because I'm professor of green logistics management. So I'm going to talk to you about green logistics, challenges and opportunities, with a focus on those actors that perform the transport operations, the logistic service providers, we call them, to be very inclusive, or LSPs. You will see this abbreviation quite a few times. LSPs, logistic service providers, are said to be extremely slow in adapting towards a greener business. So you could ask yourself, why? Why are they so slow? There are many different reasons for that. Customers are not so interested in green logistics services or green transport services. There is a big lack of requirements for how transport companies should offer greener services. There is also a lack of legislation that could be that's a well-known driver for increasing environmental content of things, but legislation in this area lacks to a large extent. The legislation that is there is quite vague. So they don't feel the pressure from legislation to go green. Then the business part of sustainability, of course. Logistics service providers are companies. They need to earn money. And unless customers are willing to pay, or there is another mechanism that makes the business go around, it's not a business opportunity, and hence they don't drive this question so far. You want to take a seat? Okay. This together, it results in a lack of adopting the technology that is there. There is a lot of quite good technology today, and really future-oriented and so on. But those companies have a tendency not to catch it and not to use it. So, and these are some of the reasons for it. There is no business opportunity for them in it. So we call it the take-up problem. They need to make investments, and I'm going to go further into this, further into my presentation. It needs investment as well as a future orientation, which together calls for a strategic take on this issue among those companies. Of course, you could ask yourself, what is green logistics? Well, it could be a lot of things. And I'm going to show you 5 thematic areas that you usually talk about green logistics in, and they are interrelated, of course. It's not split in silos, not at all, but areas of interest for green logistics. But first, before we do that, what is it to green logistics? Well, it is to analyze and evaluate logistics systems from a green perspective, from an environmental perspective, often nowadays It relates to carbon dioxides, of course, the carbon threat, the climate problems and so on, but more and more NOx, we talk of that as well. And often this is a trade-off, this is seen as a trade-off with the economic perspective. So analyze is one thing, design logistics system with environmental consideration is another area for green logistics, how to green logistics, how to make logistics greener. And a third one is how to manage logistics for sustainability. Given the system that you have, the technology that you have, how can you manage it in a way that makes the system more environmentally sustainable? Among researchers, most of us who do green logistics research, we don't only do environmental considerations, environmental analysis, we also compare it to economic and financial issues and strategic gains and image gains and so on. And lately, social aspects has gained increased attending from researchers as well. Anyway, the 5 topical areas that I announced. One of them is reverse logistics. And in the 90s, when you talked of green logistics, it was reverse logistics, which had to do mainly from the US with returns logistics. On the European side, we talked of recycling. Here, logistics has a role, given that it's good to recycle, given that it's good to reuse things. We don't debate that in logistics so much, that's for others to do. We need an efficient system for handling these types of flows as well, which is reverse logistics. City logistics, of course. I see a table over there, off-peak city logistics. You do that as well in the center. It's about finding efficient ways of supplying dense city areas and urban logistics. This is called green SCM. It's supply chain management, but with the green considerations included. So it's a lot about taking the system perspective of a supply chain or a supply network, considering different aspects, different functions in a company and so on. And in particular, the logistics aspects, of course. Corporate strategies, you recognize that man there? He's a strategic guy, he does environmental strategies for his company. From a logistics point of view, it has to do with putting logistics and environment together on a strategic agenda for companies. And of course, it should be a strategic concern for logistics service providers. Finally, reducing freight transport externalities, which has to do with technological aspects. From our research point of view, it has to do with the take-up of different improving technologies. So, if we take a closer look at this and see what does the LSPs have to do with this, how are they affected, what is their roles in these different areas? Reverse logistics, we have studied that for quite a long time. In general, when we problematize logistics, from the beginning we talk of supply chains that look like this. They end with the end customer. With recycling, we have to connect the backwards flow with the system again, and here comes the recycler as a new actor. The consumer role or the end customer role gets changed. You get a lot of new activities and so on. That is usually performed by logistics service providers. You sort things, you store things, you get rid of things, which is to distribute things that logistics actors normally take care of. And it has very interesting value perspective. You usually see this one when you talk about building value in a supply chain. It builds towards the end customer through different activities and different actors in the chain. But when you add the recycling, the product that you are supposed to recycle suddenly loses value, it drops. But then when you start to recycle it, it starts to gain new value again. So the consumer is a key player in this, but the LSP also get a change of role when you come to recycling. Previously, a couple of decades or a decade ago, you focused quite a lot among LSPs on handling return flows and using empty running in return flows to use them for recycling flows instead. So you could offer a cheap service to those who wanted to transport recycled goods, saying recycled goods, it's not in a hurry. We can wait until there is empty capacity, and then we use the capacity in a wise way. Gains for the environment and gains for business as well. This has been the case, but it's not so easy always to fit the return flows into ordinary flows and so on, and the charging is not so easy either. Another challenge that is more up to date, it's that e-commerce finally have started to increase quite a lot. It started like 15, 20 years ago. They talked a lot about e-commerce, and it was quite an opportunity, but we didn't have the systems. Now it's increasing for real. We all buy online. For the LSP, for the logistics service provider, this means that they have to deliver not only to business partners as they used to. Their ordinary milk runs, delivering to their ordinary customers, have to be readapted every day because they also have to deliver to consumers. The consumers select times when they want their deliveries. It's very complicated for LSPs they have to change quite a lot in this. They also have unpredicted volumes. You never know if your truck has many parcels that evening or few parcels that evening or that day. You have to work overtime and so on. So it gets quite complicated. And another thing with this increasing e-commerce is the free returns. I have a colleague who is very proud that she buys online because it's good for the environment. And it's also very convenient, she tells me. I can buy 5 pairs of shoes. I don't know which color and which size I want. So I buy 5 and then I return 4. I keep the one I like best, which has to be taken care of by a logistics service provider in a logistics systems. It's very difficult to plan. Causes a lot of inconvenience for them and, of course, problematic for the environment. It adds to the climate stress, you could say. Convenient for us, good for those who sell shoes, but not so much for the environment. So may
I interrupt with a question?
Absolutely.
Do you have an estimate of how big the climate stress is?
Not on shoes, for instance. So there have been very few studies on that. There was a study about 10 years ago in Scotland on book shopping, which said that if you deliver a book that you buy online, and if you get a first-time delivery, the first time you try to deliver, it's delivered to the addressee, that's good. All other options are not so good. So if you have to return and come back, then it's wasted already, compared to going to town to buy a book. So, but quite few studies, it's one. So, but it's an indication anyway. Let's move to another area, city logistics. Of course, we see a lot of company trucks delivering in cities, but also a lot of logistics service providers like DHL, Schenker, PostNord, and so on, with delivery trucks inside cities. And with city logistics, we also talk sometimes of coordinated urban distribution and urban distribution centers. Are you familiar with that? When you form a distribution center outside the city center, where you collect a lot of goods streams. That means that logistics service providers can specialize. It gives them the opportunity to specialize either in supplying the urban logistics center or to take the lead role in distributing in the city. Specialization leads to more efficiency, we know that. But it also means that urban distribution centers enable LSPs to take a lead role in this development, so they can really develop their role and use their skills, if that came true to a larger extent. So that is an opportunity, you could say. But there are also other challenges. LSPs face planning restrictions. They are not allowed in the city centers between various hours of the day. As you know, during nighttime, we can't deliver because it makes a lot of sound, so we don't want that in the city center. There are also quite many regulations coming on which trucks are allowed, which type of fuel is allowed inside city centers, only electric cars in some city centers, and the size of the truck is regulated, which put the challenge that they have to invest in a truck fleet that is adapted for doing the service, which can be a challenge. Another aspect of this is municipal distribution, that municipalities have quite a lot of activities in the cities that need to be supplied. The food, for instance, schools, elderly homes, and so on. And there are actually quite many municipalities who try to make this a distribution center, central distribution planning of this, which can cause trouble for LSPs wanting to participate in this, because it means that they need to be certifiable. They don't need to be certified according to ISO. It's not a demand. It doesn't have to be a demand. But they need to have quite good control over what they do and be able to describe it in a good way. So that's a challenge for some of them. Okay, leaving city logistics, green supply chain management. You know what supply chain management is, right? We talk about this supply chain. I tilted it a bit here. So supplier, customer, and customers, customers, and so on and so forth. So green logistics, green supply chain management. It's actually about considering the whole supply chain. It's very much about, if you look into research, it's very much about inter-organizational relationships, making organizations work together. How can that be done? And it connects to CSR. If you look into research of this, you talk a lot about social aspects when you buy from different suppliers. Child work, schooling in developing countries and so on. There's a lot of talk of that. But if you take a look at the whole supply chain and suppliers of different stages, the logistic service provider is of course another type of supplier. It's a logistic service provider, but still part of the green supply chain management. So they can absolutely play a role in this. And if you take a look, we'll take a closer look at exactly this connection between the customer who buys the logistic service and the logistic service providers. We did some research a couple of years ago now when we investigated the logistic service providers' offerings and the requirements from customers. The saying was that logistic service providers are slow, they are very bad at providing good services, said the shippers, the customers. Our investigation showed the following. We had comparable amounts of replies. And these are aspects of green logistics, how you could assess green logistics. It's emission data, you offer emission data, you offer transport planning, you offer environmental management system, eco-driving, and so forth. And if you just take a look at the levels of these curves, the upper level, the offer, the stated offer from LSPs, exceeds the shipper's stated demand in every point, and in some of them quite a lot. Surprise! Can you guess why it looks like this? The first saying is, of course, well, you were wrong. Look here, we have the right answer here. You were wrong, it's the other way around. But it's not that easy, because this is average figures. Customers, in average, have a quite wide spread of demands. The average figure is somewhere in between, about in between. Logistic service provider have to provide for a wide spread of demands. They cannot maybe provide for the highest demands, but they have to be quite high up on the scale of providing services. So they over-offer, you can say. They offer more than the majority of their customers want, because they have to keep track of those who require most. It was also seen here that the LSPs had a lower, lower perception. They didn't expect the shippers to ask this much even, so they could lift up their efforts a little bit. Yes? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm following here, Liz. Are you saying that when there is a procurement, for example,
Yep.
The offers offer more service than they are actually asked for?
Yes.
And what kind of service would that be?
Environmentally related services. This is the environmental part of the offering.
Okay, and how does that translate in terms? Is it in terms of the fuel they are going
Yeah,
to use?
it can be many things. It can be type of fuel, it can be type of vehicle, motor engine technology, for instance. Emission data, do we offer emission data for free or do you have to pay extra for it and so forth? Energy data, we had that 10 years ago, we talked a lot about that. Modal choice, transport planning, logistic system design, eco-driving. Do you as a customer demand that your LSP maintain eco-driving, for instance, or do you as an LSP offer that we have eco-driving educated people here? Things like that. Okay, yes?
The 0 to 5 here, is that a subjective grading scale?
Yes, it is.
Or is there a unit?
No, it's not. It wasn't possible to have that. We wanted to have more accurate stages, but then you cannot make the proper statistics analysis, and I think that it's sad that we haven't found those methods, because that would be more accurate, but that's the way it is. So it's do you offer this? Do you require this? What's the question? On a scale from 1 to 5, where 1 was not at all and 5 was all the time, to a high extent. So LSPs are not that bad, as you can see, compared to the demand side.
But can you explain once again the purple line there?
The purple one here. Yeah. This is the LSP's perception of the customer's demand. We asked that as well. We had a lot of analysis in this. Be happy I didn't show you everything. But this is what customers stated themselves that they wanted. And this is what LSPs, those who replied here, thought that the customers wanted.
On this,
On the same,
how much do you require?
Yeah, to what extent do you require?
To what
Yeah,
extent do you require modal choice?
exactly.
3.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, understand.
You get it?
Interesting.
I can
Yeah.
give you the reference if you're interested.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
But
Super
then you have the
interesting,
top, so there is the perception that what they think the customer wants, there is what the customer wants, but then when the customer says this is what I want, then they top it
Yes,
far up.
yes.
Is it because they don't have it and they have to build it?
No. It's because these are average figures. It's because LSPs on an average offer more than their average customer requires, because they have to offer what their top requiring customers require. So that is why. That is when you interview the LSPs and ask how does this come, it becomes quite evident that is the case, because they have a wide variety of wishes from the customers.
So basically, if you had asked the shippers, what do the LSPs provide?
We did. We have a
Then-
curve for that, but not in this one.
Then that should be a line below the yellow line.
That is, yes, it's quite close. In reality, it's quite close here. They think they, in general, offer quite okay.
Okay.
So maybe those who told us that the LSPs are really bad were the most demanding customers who didn't find their right LSPs. So, but this is a wider population, so I guess it was kind of true by them at least. But I'll give you the reference afterwards if you want it. Okay, let's move on. You have to stop me if I'm talking too long. Okay?
I think we still have time.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Corporate environmental strategies, this is a fast one. We talk about 2 different types of companies here. We talk of shippers and we talk of LSPs. On the shipper side, the customer of the LSPs, one strategy could be structural change. And what we have studied in Linköping quite a lot is centralization of distribution, which is a structural change and which is a strategic decision among shippers to do that. What do you think? Is centralization good or bad for the environment? Do you have an idea?
Depends on where you centralize.
You're a researcher, right? You started your response by it depends, because that's correct. That's correct. It depends on many different things. Previously, there was a saying that centralization is always bad. We did some research project that proved that it can be really good, but it doesn't have to be. There is no any answer to that is right or wrong, if you want that. So it depends on a lot of things. It depends on the transport work in itself, which usually the regular transport work decreases when you increases when you centralize, because you get a movement to the central point and back to the customer instead of straight on. So the distance increases for the same ton, you know that. On the other hand, the fill rates, the consolidation degree, is possible to increase quite heavily. And with this comes the possibilities to select a better mode of transport, like going on train for the consolidated parts of the transport flows. Standardization is often good for the environment, but doesn't have to be. It depends. It can be standardized transport modes, standardized lastbärare. Carriers, thank you. Can be a lot of things. Emergency deliveries is one thing that often decreases when you centralize the distribution, and that is always good for the environment. But if you're good already, then this improvement can be quite small, even if you're a good one. The localization matters quite a lot. Depends on where you are, how you can centralize, and of course legislation and regulations can play a part in how profitable it is, what you can do, because it always comes with a economic side as well for the shipper. Environmental corporate strategies for LSPs then. And it doesn't happen too much, but if you try to imagine their strategic context in a way, often LSPs are small transport operators. If you talk of hauliers and not of DHL and Schenker, then they are small transport operators, 1 to 5 trucks in the company, a few drivers. It's a low margin industry, 1 to 2% profit, if any. If any is interesting. They have difficulties in attracting competence from all levels. They have difficulties in attracting good drivers, conscious drivers. They have difficulties if they want to attract academically skilled people, because it's considered a low, not so complicated work, you know. Customer contracts are often short-term, transport per transport, or 3 months or perhaps 6 months to be happy. So any investment they do, of course, it needs to pay off. An investment can be to buy equipment, but it can also be investment in terms of organizational knowledge, eco-driving training, and so on. It pays off, but it has to have a time to pay off. And when you have a very short contract, it's very difficult to dare. If you also have a very low, if any, profit margin, you don't have the financial strength to do the necessary investments. So that is a context that more or less hinders strategic development among LSPs, and that's the problematic side of it. There are companies that have the strength and who do things as well, but for many of them it's like this. This last area is reducing freight transport externalities, and often this has to do with technology-related changes of different types. You use a more modern engine that emits less. You use biofuel. You work with, for instance, aerodynamic equipment, aerodynamic configuration, we call it. And when you talk about technology-related changes, the supply chain view differs a little bit. We often talk about investments with the transport provider, the one that runs the trucks. So they have to have a good relationship with service provider, logistic service providers, and also the customers, of course, but also with their suppliers, parts or equipment supplier or truck provider, like Ulf. We have done some research in this area to try to connect technology investments with the logistics aspects. And what you see here, anyone who do aerodynamic here? You recognize these type of pictures? They show turbulence of different trucks. In the first case here, of course, red is good, blue, yellow, green is not good. So this one is a good one, this one is a bad one. Do you recognize from these pictures what has changed? Anyone? You see a lot of more turbulence here. Yes. And the reason for the reduction of turbulence here is that the front beam of the box is not sharp-edged, but it's rounded off with a 80 millimeters radius. It's an incremental change. And you see the turbulence difference. In terms of fuel consumption, this means a reduction by about 3%. It's not very much. 3% fuel reduction means 1% reduction of costs in a haulier company, which is 1% extra on the margin, which was incrementally none from the beginning. So that's a good increase. And it's not a very heavy investment. It doesn't interfere with the logistics capacity of this truck. It's cheap. This is another change where you can see, here you see a lot of turbulence, here you see quite very little turbulence. This is a much bigger improvement, really, from fuel consumption dropped by 24% or something like that, I think. But it's a much more heavy investment for a haulier to make. It's a totally new design of a delivery car compared to the previous one. Lots of investment in technology development because it wasn't on the market when they started to build this one. So those of you who do aerodynamics maybe understand this.
In your top example here, you said there was a radius of 80 millimeters.
Yes.
On the outside.
On the outside.
How is it on the inside? Is it just one thin sheet of metal, or is this a sandwich design? Or
the walls are sandwich designed. So you have different beams that hold the walls together. So instead of a square beam like this, square beam, you round it off. So the beam is rounded. That holds. So it doesn't interfere at all with the loading capacity inside. It doesn't interfere with the space.
Outstanding.
Isn't it? I tell my colleague who did this. Okay, that's what you can do. If you take the technology provider's view in this one, Ulf, you may comment if you agree. Enablers for doing this, those two types of technology development together, is a customer with interest to innovate. Of course, you need to have a customer for your technology, otherwise it's useless. And we often talk about fire soul or driving spirit, or eldsjäl in Swedish. The equipment provider here talked about their company brand. Of course, it was their strategic intent to be a top provider of new fancy technology. And they had the knowledge that aerodynamical solutions promote costs as well as environmental impact. Of course they do, because they're in the business of constructing boxes. Barriers towards increasing the take-up of this technology then, of course. Restricted internal resources for innovative projects. They did this a little bit on the side. Those fire souls inside the technology company. The majority of the customers, they won't pay. This was an experimental truck purchased by one of the most proactive actors in the haulier business, I would say. It's not the common sense that you do like this, it's a trial. The board of the concern was hesitant, so they didn't really have the strategic strength to promote this on a bigger scale. If we take a look at the customer's view, the haulier's view, the LSP's view on this, still very few do like this, I would say. But those who do, they are biased towards positive view of environmental issues and really feel they can go for it. Enablers are, of course, important actors for them. Customers, they need to have customers who are willing to pay for top-notch logistics deliveries. They need to have a management that is in favor of taking these types of investments. They need not to be hindered by authorities. They don't get so much support, but not hinders either. And of course the owners have to agree, because it's an investment. Cost cuts, of course, increased sales, improved brand, and an eldsjäl in the company as well. Barriers, no particular internal aspect was a large barrier, because these are companies that want to do things anyway. slightly higher barriers among external factors, but a wide variety. And another barrier is lack of legislation, or lack. They don't see a clear route ahead, that this is the technology that's going to be used, so we can invest a lot. They see many, many routes and many, many different ideas about where the future is going, which is a hinder if you don't have so much to invest. Do I have time for two final ones, just to sum up?
Yes.
Well, yeah.
And one question.
Yes.
One more question. So I understand this and everything, but looking at the first, the top picture there,
Yes.
and the reductions in fuel consumption and
Yes.
cost reductions, and replacing this beam or whatever,
Yeah.
that should be, and as you say, it's directly on the margin.
Yes.
Why all those barriers about driving spirit and so it's just economically do it?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
why
We.
not?
That's a good question, and that's something we ask ourselves, and that's something we try to ask hauliers in general, because we're in touch with some of those who want to invest, but the rest doesn't. So why?
Yeah, why? Why they, I mean,
Have you
know,
ever
or
tried to
not
send?
do it?
Sorry, have you ever tried to send a questionnaire to haulier companies? It's quite difficult, and it's totally understandable, because, as I said, one to five people working quite hard to keep up with the margins, with the customers, and here comes another form. It goes away. They have to keep up with administration, with legal issues, and here comes a form from the university that we want them to fill in. It's not on top of their agenda, you could say. So it's quite difficult to come to those companies that struggle and try to understand why don't you take up this. I think one reason is that this is quite novel research. It hasn't reached a widespread yet. The lower picture of the more improved delivery track, that is running as we speak as a demonstrator. So we haven't been able to distribute the results. The one who manufactures the boxes hasn't been able yet to really show the results. So these are early results, you can say,
Okay.
but they are quite steady. So tried in simulation, tried in wind tunnel, tried in real. So we know that, but it's quite crisp. So we'll see. If I come back here in 2 or 3 years' time, we'll see what has happened. Okay. Okay, let's just to summarize some of the challenges and opportunities for logistics service providers in going green. I think I've touched on them all, but I hope so. Carbon levels increase faster than predicted. That's the global challenge. It has decreased in Sweden, but it's, according to some sources, increasing again. And what happens then is that people want to react, politicians want to react, and we researchers want to run for some good things to say. So some spontaneous actions occur, not very, very well thought through, which makes the landscape quite difficult to navigate in for those companies. Taxation here and subsidiaries there and so on, it's not very easy. The low willingness to pay for green services, of course, among customers and ultimately, my friends, among us. How often do you think about the transport when you buy something? How often do you ask?
I just have a question.
Yes?
So to that point, I think you also mentioned when in the beginning of your slides of like the challenge of meeting the customer convenience. And I mean, I had a quick example. I usually try to go to shops to buy my stuff,
Yes.
but I'm getting a lot of rebates to buy online.
Yes.
So someone somewhere is trying to change my behavior into making me pressure the logistics more.
Yep.
So then it come to me that, okay, is that my preference?
So
And
is
then
it?
I didn't feel that it's my preference, because my preference is still to go buy my product.
Yeah.
But then when somebody's facilitating something else to me, that does not become my preference again.
No. And that is a way from companies, of course, to try to make you change. And it can be good. It doesn't have to be good to do online shopping, for instance. It depends quite a lot on those contextual factors. But there is one thing where you see. But if you go online, if you had decided to go online and purchase a good, for instance. Have you ever had the possibility to select transport mode or delivery mode?
It wasn't at least in the
No, it's not easy, and if
really
possible. You had a question as well?
Yeah, and a comment. It's basically what you said about the trends of business strategies, like to try to get online, and also like, is there something related like to contrast that? Because it's not like they're going back, like the business strategies is not going back. Oh, we're gonna remove that chances for the client, the customer to get everything online. Like, is there something, or what is there out there? To try to contrast, or like, are we gonna hurry up and trying to get another solution for going greener or going?
I don't really understand your question. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I mean, like with this trend of business strategies, like getting more online shopping, and it means like a lot of travel. And is there something just like to contrast that trend? Something as a solution?
No, not that I've heard of. I think that's just development steered by technology, steered by our interest in new solutions and everything. It's nothing we can stop, and it's nothing we should try to stop, but we should be able to maybe manage it in a more wise manner. And also use you as an agent in this, in giving you the possibility to make your selection and think, do I need this tomorrow, or can I wait for 2 days? That could make a big difference to these systems, but you don't get that opportunity. Of course, a challenge, as I said previously, short time frames of contracts. So that is a problem. For LSPs to maintain skills and capabilities, even if they build up capability of doing things right, it's not so easy to maintain them, because it's a moving market, it's a lack of drivers, small companies. How do you maintain your knowledge? It takes an eldsjäl to do this, but at the same time, that becomes very vulnerable. It's not a company strategy to have one person driving the whole development. There is a high pressure today for the transport sector to lower the emissions in general, but I would say, and this is a result of research, that there is a political lack of willingness globally to do this. If I interpret what LSPs say to me, they don't see much of a political pressure, and that is a problem. That is a challenge. Sometimes we talk of Swedish regulation, but for logistics service provider, Sweden is not the interesting context. It's Europe, at least. And then you need a unified type of regulation strategy. All the above points to reactive LSP role, which is a problem. They react to requirements and they respond to requirements. If they took a more proactive role, as they could do in city logistics perhaps, maybe they could use their skills to alter the situation, and that could be one opportunity. Internal opportunities, if you think about inside the companies, taking a more proactive role, of course, in city logistics, in strategic development, if you can, and in building alliances with customers and with technology providers. Those are opportunities that you could work with yourself as an LSP if you wanted to. External opportunities that could happen if the environment changes. Increased cost for transportation is one thing that can happen if taxation increases internationally and so on. That could change the landscape of logistics quite dramatically if costs increased enough. And we also have this consumer role, and also, of course, the customer role. If we talk B2B, it's a customer role. An increasing awareness could be an opportunity if it happened, if we are willing to act accordingly. In requiring green deliveries when we buy things, we don't do that because we actually don't have the opportunity in many times. Relaxing time windows. Can you have your deliveries in 3 days? Do you have to have it tomorrow? Can you wait? And if you say you can, and if you say I can wait, then it gives a lot of extra time to produce efficient systems, of course. And I'm coming back to this returns handling. We have to think when we purchase online. a little bit more. And it should be, in my opinion, we should punish bad behavior in that sense. It should come with a cost. Then you steer it quite well. As a consumer, you react to costs. So that would be an efficient way. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for your questions. That's the end of my speech.
Thank you very much for the interesting presentation.